started the firm with one idea in mind, and that was to take advantage of hundreds of millions of commercial security cameras that are around the world, put a video analytics software that could integrate to those existing security cameras, and that software was only going to look for one thing, and that was going to be visible guns.
Welcome to the podcast series RANE Insights on Security with Brian Lynch. Today, Brian's talking with Kieran Carroll from ZeroEyes about the company's software technology. Think of it as an early warning system. For global security departments, this technology could become part of their capabilities around threat identification, particularly related to workplace safety strategies and even active shooter situations. Let's listen in.
Welcome, Kieran, to the podcast today to discuss active shooter mitigation strategies, primarily for global security departments in their overall strategy to limit risk exposure for their employees, their firms, and visitors.
Hey, Brian, thanks for having me. It's great to be on the podcast.
Excellent. So let's start by telling us about your firm, ZeroEyes.
Sure. Yeah, ZeroEyes is a technology company based outside of Philadelphia, and we've been around since 2018. We actually started the company right after the Parkland shooting happened back in 2018. The team is primarily former military special operators. Most of us went and worked corporately after leaving military service. And we started the firm with one idea in mind, and that was to take advantage of hundreds of millions of commercial security cameras that are around the world. And what we proposed to do was put a video analytics software that could integrate to those existing security cameras. And that software was only going to look for one thing, and that was going to be visible guns. If you guys remember, the Parkland shooter was staged in a stairwell under field of view of an existing security camera with a visible gun for about a minute or so prior to actually going and committing that act of violence. And our company looked at that and said, well, this is an opportunity for us to identify an alert to an active shooter prior to someone entering the building or coming from a traditional staging area. So that's the idea that we went to market with. We recruited a world-class technology team, folks who are doing some of the most cutting-edge video analytics and computer vision analytics in the world. And since 2018, we started with a small group of guys. We've increased the size of the company dramatically. We're at about 40 employees right now. And what we have found is that we have product market fit across very, very wide verticals. So for us, it's going to be, public K through 12 districts here in the United States, as well as higher education campuses, commercial enterprise organizations such as shopping malls and corporate campuses, big box retail, healthcare, gaming, financial services. And then we've also found a home within the government. So state, local, and then federal government, primarily within the Department of Defense as well. So we're doing other stuff, I think more boutique computer vision analytics and building software for the Department of Defense. But what it all kind of tracks back to is the ability to detect visible firearms. And that's our goal. We want to be the best in the world at being able to do that.
Yeah, thanks for that overview, Kieran. And let's start the conversation today around the technology. And I've heard you say to me in the past that the data sets that you use, the ability to collate that information inside of your algorithms is pretty powerful. So can you explain for the listeners a little bit about your technology that you use?
Sure, yeah. So we're what's considered an artificial intelligence company, and we use a subset of AI, which is called computer vision. And the way I like to think about computer vision is typically a software that's going to be integrated to existing security cameras or to any sort of camera in general. And basically what the algorithm does is it looks multiple times per second for any kind of object that a data set is built around. So for us, it's going to be firearms. Unlike a lot of AI companies in the market, and not just in security, but in the broader market as well, ZeroEyes did not go to the internet to download or web scrape, as it's called, millions of images of guns and build that into a data set. A lot of companies do that. And what we have found is that it's problematic for a bunch of different reasons. For one thing, you're at the mercy of how folks on the internet label data. So there's certainly ethical considerations there. The other thing that we've found is that internet data does not lead to very high performance in real world deployed environments. So what our company did instead is that we went and built organic data sets. So it was guys from the company, early on running around with guns under probably 50 different types of commonly found commercial security cameras. We then took that video, we painstakingly annotated it frame by frame. We actually have a proprietary way that we cancel what I would consider noise or bad data from the data set. So at the end of the day, what you're left with is a really, really high confidence data set that's going to lead to very high performance in deployed environments. And we've been fortunate. We've been able to test this real world and across numerous different spaces. From education to big commercial enterprise companies to the Department of Defense. So this is something that we're always tweaking. We're always improving it. We have a full data lab here in the Philadelphia area. We also employ green screen lab technology. So we can actually take a customer's unique environment, such as like a casino floor or maybe like a big box retail environment, places that are really, really hard to actually go and collect data. We can take that and replicate that in a green screen environment, walk around with guns in that environment, and then create unique custom-built data sets for those clients. So when you think about it, it's we're a small company, but I think we're innovating pretty heavily within this space.
Sounds good, Kieran. So your firm is about the identification of weaponry, and you have curated data sets. So let's talk, if you can, about false positives and false negatives during the process of the technology view.
Sure. Yeah. So, I think any computer vision company that says that they don't get false positives, you have to, sort of automatically be suspicious there. We get false positives all the time. Our algorithm looks for objects in hands predominantly. So anytime there's an object in a human's hands, it has the possibility of becoming a false positive. The way that we reduce false positives is, there's a couple different things. One is obviously building really high performance data sets. We weed out, thousands of opportunities for an algorithm to think that something's a false positive by ingesting really good data. But on top of that, because we're deployed to these like dynamic environments, places like shopping malls, for example, where there's, thousands of people within the hallways day to day, what we have found is that the best way to ensure that a client never gets a false positive that's going to turn into a false alarm is to have a human verify every single alert that hits our platform. So when the algorithm, makes a detection or something that it thinks is a detection, within milliseconds, it's going to spit out an alert. We have a ZeroEyes verification team that's 24/7, 365. The team consists of predominantly former military veterans who are very comfortable making split-second determinations whether something's a gun or not. And then within a second or two, they're going to verify that if that's a gun or not. If it's not a gun, they're going to mark it as a false positive. So the end user is never going to receive that alert. But also the algorithm then takes that image and learns that that's a false positive. So we're constantly training the algorithm, we're constantly tweaking the algorithm, and the end goal there is obviously to deliver the strongest performance as possible to our clients. False negatives is something obviously slightly harder to quantify because unless there's an incident, we're typically not going to know whether there was a gun under field of view of that camera, unless there's a police response or maybe someone unfortunately got shot. False negatives are much harder to quantify, so we're always trying to figure out ways that we can do that. Realistically, the best way to have an understanding of your false negative performance is to go out and test in as many different environments as possible. So that's what the ZeroEyes team does. When we go and deploy our software to a client, we're going to test every camera that we possibly can, and that's going to involve typically a team member or somebody on the client side walking around with a firearm or an airsoft gun or something like that resembles closely a firearm. And we should begin detections, right? Like it's the KPI here is pretty simple. Either you get a detection or you don't. So that's about as I think probably as deep into false negatives as we can go. The other thing too is there's quite a different degree of variability between commercial security cameras here in the United States, right? So there's different resolutions, there's different heights and angles and lighting configurations. all of these variables are things that we take into consideration when building these data sets. We try to go for as broad as possible within the underlying data set. So the cameras that we use to build these algorithms are different heights. Anything from 8 feet all the way up to 30 feet. Different lighting configurations, different cameras that run different resolutions, and all these things are going to sort of have an impact on performance. So with very, very good cameras, we get rifle and pistol detections out to 50, 60, 75 feet or longer. Resolution is really going to limit the distance that the algorithm is able to get detections, because scientifically and mathematically, everything breaks down to what's called pixels per foot on target. So that's the algorithm actually mathematically counting pixels and then aligning them to what it thinks is a gun. So hopefully that kind of made sense. I didn't want to go too far into the technical weeds.
No, that's great, Kieran. What I'm hearing is there's human verification to attempt to solve the false positive problem, reducing that risk, and your false negatives are handled via continual testing and real life results. And then those real life results will help with the mitigation from whatever comes from that real life result wherein something might have been missed. Let me go next, Kieran, to global security departments. We typically advise our clients relative to strategies on implementing, managing risks. There's really 4 areas, or what I call 4 buckets, and it's the identification, the analysis, the response, and then the resolution. So global security departments may have those 4 buckets or areas of their focus in their strategic planning. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I see this as an early warning system to identify problems as quickly as possible. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that assessment. I think the beauty in what we're doing is the software is persistent 24/7 as long as that camera is turned on. The software is going to be proactive, and the resulting output of our software is hopefully going to be something actionable. So when we tell people that we're trying to be the most proactive and actionable solution on the market, it's really because we're able to integrate the software to the cameras that are already in place, and then the output of an alert, we're trying to put that into a customer's workflow with minimal disruption. So the alerts, depending on the client, and their preferences, can go to as few or as many different people within the organization as they want. We can send those alerts directly to local 911 dispatch centers, PSAPs, if a client chooses that. And because the overarching software framework is what we call API driven, we can also integrate to the existing infrastructure that a client already has as far as communications and notifications and video management systems and access controls. So the end goal there is, you're exactly right. It's an early warning system, and it's the ability to get that alert to as many different people with decision-making authority as possible within that organization.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back to the podcast. Welcome back to the podcast. We are talking with Kieran Carroll from ZeroEyes. Can we talk a little bit deeper on the CCTV systems, maybe the video management systems that firms have, and the integration of your product, of this capability, aligned with what they already have in place? What would that look like? If I'm sitting at XYZ company and I have what I think is a really solid CCTV system, I might have security officers at my lobby. I might have them on patrol. How does this technology integrate with that system and make it better? Let's get to the early warning detection system. How does this make that better? Can you go a little bit deeper on that for us, Karen?
Sure. Yeah, and Brian, I think you would probably agree with this assessment, but humans who are watching hundreds or thousands of tiled video feeds in a GSOC or in some other sort of like security apparatus, humans are not good, right, at constantly monitoring and constantly being vigilant. we tend to lose focus after 20 or 30 minutes. We need constant breaks. That's the beautiful thing about, I think, a persistent software, right? Is that the algorithm doesn't take breaks. It's always looking, it's always staring, and our software in particular is only looking for visible guns, which I think within most organizations is probably about the highest level threat within that GSOC that could happen day to day. So that's like, I think sort of the first part of it, right? But how do we actually make existing security operating centers into more of a force multiplier? Well, it comes down to the fact that the software, as I think I mentioned earlier, is API driven. So the output of our software is going to be a keyframe image detection with a timestamp and a geolocation. So essentially, it's a picture of somebody with a gun. It's very, very low bandwidth. It's low throughput, which means we're able to blast that alert out to as many different people in the organization that need it. And what we currently do on the ZeroEyes side is that we send that alert out over what we call the ZeroEyes client dashboard. The dashboard consists of a white labeled, basically a website that typically your GSOC operator will have up on a TV screen, but also a ZeroEyes mobile app. So if you have mobile security officers that are on roving patrols around your organization, they're able to get that alert directly to their phone. And then as a redundancy, we do text message notification as well. And that's just the baseline ZeroEyes platform. On top of that, when a human verifies something as a true detection, so a true alert, we're able to send out this information simultaneously. So we can also send it to directly to the local public safety answering point, so that 911 dispatch center. And the way that we do that is we're actually able to skip the traditional dispatch process. So our ZeroEyes team will never be put on hold. We're never going to go into a call queue. We're going to get that verified detection directly to that PSAP operator on the dashboard that they're already using, at which point a phone call will automatically be triggered between the ZeroEyes operating center and that local PSAP, and that's really just to ensure that they actually got the detection and they're tracking it accordingly. And then on top of that, because we're API driven, we're able to take our alert and push it into the existing infrastructure that a customer is already using. So you mentioned video management systems, and with really, really mature clients, typically they're going to have a very sophisticated video management system, something like a Genetec or a Milestone. ZeroEyes has integrations built to basically all the leading video management systems that are out there. And what's going to happen is when a verified ZeroEyes detection is dispatched, an alarm will trigger within that video management system. So your GSOC operator, who's probably already looking at that video management system and has tiled video up on their computer or their TV, they're going to get that alarm instantaneously. They're able to then take control of cameras. They're able to do follows. They're able to execute their protocols on that the organization already has in place. On top of that, we can also take our alert and integrate it to an access control. So if an organization has an automated access control system, we're able to basically relay our detection into that access control system and have those GSOC operators be able to automatically lock down portions of the building or the entire building, depending on how the logic was already built, sort of predefined logic. We also do a lot of integration to what I'll call mass notification platforms. These are oftentimes called emergency notification systems as well. So typically, what we're seeing more and more of here in the United States is that, I think enterprise level companies are going to solutions like Everbridge or Mutual Link or Raptor, Rave. I mean, there's probably a dozen or so that have pretty good market share here in the U.S. If your workforce is already using something like that, we're able to take our alert and put it directly into that feed. Our end goal is to minimize disruption to the existing workflow. We want to be able to enhance situational awareness to the folks that make decisions, and also get these alerts out to an organization's employees so that they can make their own decisions, right, on how to respond to these kinds of threats. So the end goal, I think, and this is more and more, I think, what we're seeing across the security industry in general, is our software is agnostic to basically every kind of hardware, right? Any kind of digital IP camera we can integrate to, any kind of video management system we can integrate to. And that's the beauty of, I think, of software as a service sort of platforms in the security spaces. We're able to take, I think, our very niche but universally scalable capability and put it into the infrastructure that a customer has already paid for, and be very cost effective. So I don't know if that is a good answer to your question, Brian, but that's kind of where, I think how we think about it directionally.
Yeah, makes sense. And your question to me about whether I agree with augmenting the capabilities of security officers is certainly something that we advise our clients on for the reasons that you indicated. Constant, persistent software detection that doesn't take a break, or there isn't a shift change or anything like that. And it's singularly focused on solving one question, which is there a weapon visible to the camera? And if you go back to security departments at firms, their number one priority typically is the protection, safety, and security of people. And this process is one to augment existing security. It may be in a firm that has exceptional security, has a great strategic plan, is well funded. This particular process augments that existing mature system. And can you talk a little bit about those firms, Kieran, that may not have a full security department, that may leverage contractors, vendors? They might have a couple of security officers. They probably have some cameras. How does this help them?
Sure. Yeah, and I think you already, definitely hit on it, right? It's cost-effective augmentation of their services. And we work with a lot of different firms that outsource or third party the majority of their security functions, particularly within like the retail space, right? Um, what we're always trying to do is we're helping those third party security providers by being able to, give them I think a proactive early warning system, to use your words. And we're able to do that without having to sign separate agreements with these third parties, right? That's why I think one of the cooler things that we're doing as a company is, the end user, the end client, when they, I think buy a service like this, typically, we've seen other vendors in the space go out and try to, nickel and dime third party providers to also be a subscriber. We as ZeroEyes don't do that, because I think the only thing that we're truly looking for is we're trying to stop or mitigate an active shooter threat, right? So the majority of companies that use third party security providers, we're always going to give them access to our application. They're the folks on the ground that are going to be the initial responders to this kind of event. And they need every kind of tool that they can have to do their job effectively. We are seeing, and I think with respect to enterprise level, Fortune 1000, Fortune 500 companies, we are seeing companies more and more frequently adopt, I think, what I would consider emerging technology. These firms are looking, like, to your point, they are trying to protect their people as best they possibly can. There's an element of corporate social responsibility in there. The belief that an employer needs to do everything within their power to ensure that a work environment is safe and secure. There's also legal considerations. There's duty of care, which is a portion of U.S. tort law actually, which basically mandates that employers have to provide reasonable safety and security accommodations for basically everybody on site, to include their customers and clients and visitors. So what we're seeing more and more is that when companies make these sort of capital purchases of software and security hardware solutions, there's always going to be a question of, does this answer duty of care responsibilities? And more, I'm seeing chief security officers and VPs of security that also come with a significant risk background. So they're looking at things from a duty of care, a reputational damage, and a liability perspective. So I think, if as a software OEM, if we're able to answer those considerations with something that's reasonable and effective and ultimately, not cost prohibitive, I think we're in a good spot, right? And that's why we as ZeroEyes eventually see, I think, universal adoption of a weapons detection capability at public facing buildings because if you're familiar with like how building code and fire code were sort of developed in the last 50 or 60 years, that's you know I think we're in line with eventually going into some sort of building code, particularly for bigger public venues. And that's one of the other sort of interesting thing too. I think about our capability is that we're not overly partisan, right? Our company and I think the other vendors too on the market, we're not advocating to take away people's guns. We're not advocating to arm teachers in schools, right? We're a pretty common sense middle ground solution that's cost effective. So with all these kind of forces at work, that's why I think we're seeing adoption, not just at big enterprise companies, but small, to your point, smaller companies too that probably have to outsource some of their security apparatus. So that was a long answer to I think a fairly short question, but hopefully I kind of hit the points there.
Yeah, Kieran, great points in that response. And if you look at the experience of active shooter incidents from FBI reporting since 2000 on this topic, the average is within a window of 16 minutes to 29 minutes. So that'll tell you how important it is for the identification of the problem and then taking some action to make yourself safer and to also respond to the authorities about what's happening in that particular area. I'd like to spend, if I can, Kieran, just the next couple minutes on going through the action steps of what the process is. If I have a system that's set up, I'm a mature security department, or I have minimal security, but I want to take advantage and leverage the capability that this technology affords me. What does that process look like if I'm sitting there as the head of security at a firm? How do I use this, and what is that process?
Sure, yeah. So the first thing that happens, right, is our team will come and do an assessment. We're going to look at your video cameras. We're going to look at your video management systems if you have one, and we're going to look at sort of the supporting infrastructure as far as communications and workflow, emergency action procedures go. Because when our install team shows up, what they're going to need is they're going to need typically some sort of network access, right? We need to be able to ingest those video feeds into our analytic platform. We can deploy our analytic platform basically one of four ways. We can do an on-prem solution where we put a server on site. We can do a complete cloud solution if a company is comfortable leveraging cloud for this kind of thing. More typically with bigger enterprise firms, we do what's called a hybrid approach where we do some of the processing on site with a secure video appliance and maybe the rest of it happens in the cloud. And then the last way that we do it, which is also very common, is a complete air gap solution. So I think we're very flexible with how we deploy the platform, and I don't think we've ever really ran into huge issues with getting the network security stuff figured out with our clients. So it's a relatively straightforward process, right? If we're able to access those video feeds and pull it into our analytic, we turn the analytic on. The analytic then starts working, right? Because it's relatively quick and painless, we're able to do hundreds or thousands of cameras as far as the deployment goes within several days typically, particularly if all the IT to IT work has been worked out, prior to the engagement really starting off. So it's relatively straightforward and relatively painless. Typically the stuff that we run into obviously are going to be the IT security folks who are always going to have questions about a third-party vendor having access to part of the network. We're often able to get around this by whitelisting IP ranges and stuff like that to make sure that that's extra secure. We also have security engineers on staff who look at cybersecurity holistically for our company and make sure that we're doing all the right things that we need to do. So yeah, I mean, as far as if you're a chief security officer looking at this, it's really having us show up on site, doing the assessment, installing the analytic, turning the analytic on, and then making sure that the output of the analytic integrates into your workflow in the appropriate way. So we typically go and we'll test, we'll make sure that, for one thing, that the analytics performing and getting weapon detection alerts. And then the next piece of that is, well, where do those weapon detection alerts go to? So we have to have an understanding of who in the organization needs to get notified. We have to have an understanding of, does the organization want 911 to be notified if there's a verified weapon detection alarm that comes in? And then as far as all the other integration pieces to the existing infrastructure, where do you want us to integrate to? Do you want us to integrate to the VMS or access controls or your mass notification platforms? Usually these things are relatively straightforward. And, I think the good news now is we have a playbook ironed out for most verticals. So nothing really ever catches us by surprise anymore. So we're able to sort of, in a consultative way, go in and, educate these clients, because we've been doing this now for 3 years. So we've seen, quite a few different, ways of kind of cracking the nut on how we do this. So, hopefully that answers your question.
It certainly does. And it certainly is a holistic approach to the overall strategic plan of a company. And you can fit that to meet whatever that plan might be for that particular company. I do want to get a response from you on the analytics identify a weapon. It then gets viewed by your command staff at your operations center, and then it gets either verified or not. What's that timeline look like?
Yes, so the analytic will make a determination within milliseconds whether something is a gun or not, and then from there it takes, depending on how the network is set up, between another 1 to 2 seconds to get to any sort of human verification team. ZeroEyes monitors and verifies for the vast majority of our customers. That being said, we do have some customers that have very mature GSOC capability, and they're able to handle this in-house, or they're a government client like the Department of Defense that we're never going to monitor for. But regardless, a human's always going to verify something. So within a second or two, that alert comes to a human, and within another second or two, a human makes a determination whether it's a real gun or not. So, from what I call flash to bang, so a weapon, being under field of view of a camera, to the end user getting an alert on their cell phone or their desktop dashboard or the PSAP getting that alert, typically is going to be anywhere between 3 and 5 seconds on average. Sometimes if significant cloud is involved, it might be up to 7 seconds. But I think still realistically that's a very, very quick notification timeline, considering that most other solutions on the market are particularly reactive. So that's really what we're going for. It's the ability to shorten the response time, get that sort of critical real-time information directly out to first responders as well as the folks on site.
Thanks, Karen. And it certainly is a technology that has left a boom, and the ability to early warn on a possible problem only enhances the ability of that company to respond in their already designed response and mitigation strategies. So it's really augmenting what is already established by providing an early warning system, if you will. Karen, again, thank you for your time today and the information provided.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. My pleasure.
Kieran Carroll is CFO of ZeroEyes, a weapons detection company used by educators, businesses, and others to help locate threats before they become violent. Individuals and organizations turn to RANE for risk intelligence that cuts through the hype to focus on what they need to know, what to expect, and what to do. Subscribe to RANE's core membership and get our daily risk book digest, weekly intelligence briefs on cyber, geopolitical, and financial crime, access to knowledge-sharing webinars, and breaking alerts on important risk developments. Sign up today and let RANE power your business to success. Go to ranenetwork.com. That's RANE network.com. Thanks for listening.